What's up guys, it's BNet from We Make Best, and with Briar about to get LL'd out of the format, people are wondering how Viserai will look without Rosetta Thorn, so we decided to try and find out for ourselves. What we've ended up on is a Dread Scythe, Rune Chant stacking, OTK, Looming Doom, combo control, deck of the century 3000, or for short, Looming Doom Viserai. And we gotta say the results from this deck have actually been pretty surprising, so let's get into the deck tech. Looming Doom Viserai is a defensive based deck looking to slow the game down while producing insane amounts of rune chants as fast as possible. Then we look to OTK the opponent with 30 plus rune chants and either a Ninth Blade or an Arakni Ascendancy. In the games that this doesn't kill, we look to close out the game by setting up any amount of rune chants and then sacking them to Looming Doom to help close out the game. Dread Scythe is the best option as it's difficult to enable Rosetta Thorn in this style of deck, and Scythe can be played as a one card hand, which is quite important in matchups where we get taxed like Icelander and Lexi. So starting out with our game enders, we have 2 Ninth Blades and 3 Arakni Ascendancy. These cards coming in with a stack of 30 plus rune chants for free is how we win most of our games, and we ended up on these numbers as you want more than just one of each, so we can easily find them once we're done stacking rune chants, but then they're also block 3s which get used for that quite often. The next cards we'll mention here are the 3 Become the Arknights and 3 Rattlebones that we see as additional 3 block cards that can fetch our attacks when we need them as well. Become the Arknight really helps the consistency of the deck and allows us to search for red Read the Runes if we draw our attacks too early in the game. Having access to Rattlebones means we can block with our attack actions and still use them later in the game once our rune chants are set up. For rune chant production, we chose to run 3 Blessing of the Occult, 6 Read the Runes, 6 Reduce to Rune Chant, 6 Runeblade Incantation, and 3 Oath of the Arknight, and most importantly 3 Mordred Tide. So Blessing of the Occult and Read the Runes produce the most rune chants out of any cards in the deck, but they also block for 2. In an early build of the deck, we had extra copies of these cards, but they clunked up our hand too much as they don't have go again, and then they punished us when we blocked because they only block for 2. The 6 Runeblood Incantations are goated simply for having go again to allow us to get 2 or 3 rune chants from the card, but also almost guarantees an extra one due to Viserai's ability on our next non-attack action. We peeled back from 9 since again they only block for 2. The 6 Reducers are easily your best defense reacts as they progress both your plans of slowing the game down as well as producing rune chants. Then the addition of 3 Oath of the Arknights has been surprisingly good. That's simply a block 3 blue that has go again and makes a rune chant on its own. Then obviously pair any of these cards with Mordred Tide and you've just made an insane amount of rune chants very quickly. Next up are the cards we try to pair with our rune chant production to help trigger Viserai's ability. In these slots we run a Gorganian Tome, red and yellow Sift, blue Whispers of the Oracle, and these cards are all 0 cost go again spells that block for 3 and have slight upsides to help filter our deck. They also fix awkward hands and produce rune chants all at the same time. Then to round out the deck, we run 3 Sink Below and 3 Faith Deceive to help slow the game down by blocking out our opponent's attacks efficiently. And we have a 1-of blue Spellblade Assault as a discard target for Become the Arknight that also blocks for 3. We wanted to fit more of these in the list, but we couldn't trim any of our yellow rune chant production to replace with more blue cards. And then we run 1 Remembrance to help cycle your Mordred Tides, Read the Runes, and your attacks in the fatigue matchups. As for our equipment, we ended on Dread Scythe, Arknight Skullcap, Fyendal Spring Tunic, Grasp of the Arknight, and Spellbound Creepers. Dread Scythe has been an overperformer, especially when compared to the book. The book really sucked, but Dread Scythe is a big help in closing out games or even just using this weapon to attack with our stack of rune chants whenever we need to. Arknight Skullcap is basically for the extra block because we'll guaranteed be lower life for the whole game because we don't actually attack our opponent until turn 5 or 6. And getting the extra block always feels super good to block on hit effects and help keep our good hands instead of blocking. Then as for the sideboard, we run some extra defensive tools to bring in for certain matchups. Oasis Respite is for the Wizards, Dorinthia, and Guardians, and Sigil is also good against Wizard, and we often bring them in other matchups when we're going first. This rounds on me is basically just for ninjas like Fire and Katsu, and Unmovable is also for Guardians and Dorinthia. And we also have a standard Arcane Barrier equipment package for Wizards and for other Runeblades. Alright, so that's the deck tech done, let's get straight into the action.
So we start off the game against the Bravo, winning the die roll. We choose to go first to abuse our infinite setup cards. We get pretty lucky as we have a nice turn 0 hand in the form of red Runeblood Incantation and 2 Read the Runes, along with a Fate Foreseen. The Read the Runes not having go again means we can't play both of them this turn, so we just try to find the most efficient way to pitch the yellow one so it doesn't get stuck in our hand. We end up pitching it to Grasp and using the Fate Foreseen to pitch to our Runeblood Incantation. As we want to get a little greedy here to speed up our rune chant clock, we decide to be greedy here since the opponent is on a 4-card hand, so the chances of them having anything too scary is very low. Passing the turn, Bravo starts off by pitching into a Zealous Belting. When checking our hand to see if we want to block or not, we decide to take all the non-on-hit damage this turn, as we have a very good turn of our own, that being the Runeblood into the Read the Runes once again. And then Arsling our Unmovable to completely shut down the first big play the Bravo tries to make this game. With all this in mind, we decide to simply use our life as a resource and take everything. We ended up taking 10 damage, but seems like a win to us overall, as we follow through with our initial plan of casting Runeblood into Read the Runes, then Arsling the Unmovable. Now passing back to the opponent, they actually tank for a bit on this turn, trying to figure out the correct line of play. They end up activating Bravo and swinging with a Crush the Weak. We declare no blocks as we intend to use our D-Reacts, but the opponent jumps the gun a little bit here and casts their Pummel on their Crush the Weak. I'm guessing because they didn't expect D-Reacts from a Viserai deck. Nonetheless, we get maximum value for our Unmovable from Arsenal and sink below, allowing us to even sink away our Looming Doom in our hand, which finds us an insane hit in Blessings of the Occult that we can cast off our Tunic next turn. Going back to our turn, we follow the original plan and Arsenal another D-React, then pass back to the opponent. The opponent ends up tapping out to activate Bravo and then swinging with the Dominated Thunderquake for their turn. We're a little disappointed here as we were looking to block out with most of our hand. We instead are forced into blocking with a Sift from our hand and the Reduce from our arsenal just to save some health and produce a Rune Chant in the process. Opponent passes back to us. The Blessings and the Runebloods trigger, giving us an extra 5 Rune Chants to begin our turn. We choose to pitch away our Arakni as we deemed it too early and we're under no pressure to actually send it yet, so instead choosing to Arsenal the Sift just as a non-attack action with Go Again to help produce Rune Chants and filter our hand for the next turn. Passing back to our opponent, they play a Crippling Crush. Since we have a really strong turn on ours, going Sift into Mordred into Read the Runes, we'll happily chuck our Skullcap in front of the Crippling along with our Reducers in hand to create some Rune Chants on top. Back to our turn, we actually decide to cast the Mordred into the Read the Runes, trying to get greedy with the Sift in case we draw an awkward hand and need help filtering it later on. Our turn cycle ended up producing 10 Rune Chants and blocking out a Crippling Crush, so we're super happy with this. Passing back to the opponent, they tap out once again to activate Tectonic Plating, then cast Terra Sunder, then swing with their Anathos for 7 Dominate. We can't let this hit, so we put some equipment in front of it along with the sink below to deny the on hit. We sink away our second Blessings of the Occult since this card doesn't have Go Again, drawing us into a Whisper of the Oracle. We get back to our turn with 29 Rune Chants and a 9th Blade. We fight every urge in our body telling us it's too early to send it, since instead we can just sift into Blessings for an additional 5 Rune Chants for next turn, but the voices in our head prevail and we end up just throwing the 9th Blade at him because swag. Jokes aside, the last deciding factor was because we could use our Spellbounds to flash out the Blessings, which can accelerate us towards our second 9th Blade to swing for the game. The opponent shows us a handful of blues and 1 yellow, so they're able to AB most of the Rune Chant damage. They run out of cards though and are left with an attack for 9 and 17 more Rune Chants left to come in. After blocking with their equipment, the opponent ends up on 17 health from 40 at the start. We decide to push this advantage by activating our Spellbounds, but instead of for the Blessings, we use our Sift from Arsenal to gain an action point from the Go Again. This allows us to use the spare blue in our hand to attack with Dread Scythe for an additional 4 damage, leaving our opponent on 13 and having to pass the turn back to us. So our turn again, we have an interesting one. First things first, we want to cast the Gorganian Tome to get the most information before committing to a play. We draw into a blue Sift, which is close to perfect as it allows us to filter these awkward defensive cards from our hand, as we really want to use this tempo we've made to make something big happen. After sifting away the D-Reacts, we draw into a Runeblood incantation, allowing us to pitch the blue to cast the Runeblood into the Blessings, both of which triggering Viserai, and then Arsling the Oasis to counter the Bravo's next play. Passing over to the Bravo, they have a very powerful turn of activating Bravo into a Crippling Crush. Lucky for us though, we came prepared with our Arsenal Oasis, so we're safe to block with one of the Sifts, our gloves, and cast Oasis Respite targeting the Crippling. Back to us now, and sadly we're left with a pretty awkward hand. With only 6 Rune Chants, the 9th Blade is still going to cost us 3 resources, so instead we opt to attack with our Dread Scythe. We come in for 10 damage split while getting an arsenal of our 9th Blade. The opponent makes a questionable block with their Crown of Providence, but also putting a Crippling Crush in front. We draw into an interesting hand of Mordred, Looming Doom, and a D-React. We're looking to cast both Mordreds into a Looming Doom off of our yellow and our Tunic resource, so we're pretty quick to declare no blocks when the opponent taps out to cast a red Choke Slam. Happy to take this and continue to use our life as a resource. Back to us, we still have a steady health lead. We follow the original plan of Mordred, Looming Doom with 5 counters to let us pressure the opponent for 2 damage at the end of every turn until the end of the game. Passing back to our opponent, they suspiciously swing with a Command and Conquer with 1 floating and 2 cards still in hand. Quite the clear tell their pummel is incoming. Sadly, our hand doesn't let us outplay the opponent even with this knowledge, since CNC cannot be targeted by D-Reacts. So pretty sad, but we have to declare no blocks here and let our arsenal die, along with discarding one of the Read the Runes. Game's getting kinda close now, but here we get to attack with a Spellblade into a Looming Doom trigger to present lethal, so we're demanding blocks here. We also get to arsenal a D-React, so we're feeling pretty safe going into this endgame. Opponent blocks with their equipment, then chooses to AB 1 damage of our Looming Doom, as they only have 1 AB. Back over to our opponent, they swing with their hammer with 2 cards still in hand. We smell another pummel from a mile away and declare no blocks. Opponent jumps the gun, trying to go for the kill, casting a red pummel on their Anathos, which is now coming in for 10 damage. But since we're prepared with our 2 D-Reacts, we're able to shut down majority of this damage, overall only losing 2 health after the exchange. Going back to our turn, we have a Whisper, an Oath, and a Spellblade in hand, all blue. We choose to cast a Whisper to look for some D-Reacts, as well as trigger 1/2 of Viserai's ability. We then pitch the Oath to attack with Spellblade. This triggers Viserai to make us a rune chant, and now Spellblade is coming in for 2 physical, along with 2 rune chants, and creating 3 more for our next turn. The opponent is forced to pitch a blue to AB the rune chant, use a red pummel to block the attack, and use their Spinal Crush to AB 1 off the damage from Looming Doom at the end. Over to the opponent, but they're forced to just pass back to us. We draw close to the nuts here with an Arknight Ascendancy, along with an Oath of the Arknight, just to buff our Arknight even more and add salt to the wound. We pitch away our Become the Arknight to cast the Oath, then use the Floating and the Tunic resource to play an Arknight coming in for 6 with Dominate, along with 3 rune chants, followed by Looming Doom, while also getting to arsenal a D-React. Opponent tries their best to block it out as efficiently as possible, but it's just too much, and we finish them off thanks to the Dominate from Arknight. So overall, super fun deck, and after playing it into multiple different matchups, we believe there is some actual viability to it, especially to counter the slower decks of the format. We'll leave the deck list in the description like always, but for now we outie. Later.